Go ahead.
Okay, so for the second article, I talked about the different kinds of documentation status. The first one is unauthorized, which are people who live in the country without legal authorization to do so. They don't have visas, and they don't really have long-term residency or work permits, which are really important for living here and being involved. And they're about 1/4 of all the immigrants in the U.S. who are unauthorized. And the next one is mixed status. This is when at least one member of the family is not authorized, and it could be both parents, or it could be one parent, or a grandparent or something. And this causes a lot of fear in the families because they don't know if someone's going to be deported or not for some certain reason, and so they just have a lot of fear in that. And it can come from a lot of different circumstances of things that happen, like a parent has to like run from someone, I don't know, somewhere else. And another one is citizen children of unauthorized parents. The student is either
the student is born in the United
yes,
States.
the child is born in the U.S., but the parents immigrated over here, and so they are technically U.S. citizens while their parents are not, and so that causes a lot of fear too, because they might not have parents, and so they tend to not look for like extra help in things, the parents or the students necessarily, because of this fear of like being found out, and so
And separated.
yeah, and separated. And you told a story about your family.
My
I mean,
family.
not your family.
No, so I
people
went to
that you were
Tijuana,
with.
Mexico,
Yeah.
and I talked to some, like a place where immigrants are deported, and they were telling their stories, and it was talking about this man who got deported and couldn't say goodbye to his family, and like his kids were asking all these questions, and it was really sad because they didn't know what happened to him, and they were really confused at like why this was happening. And he was saying that he probably wouldn't ever be able to like go back and see them, and just the struggle that he's having of like coming back and not having anyone because he had been in the U.S. for so long.
Because I think if you're deported, isn't there, I mean, on top of going through the like the waiting process, if you're deported for being found to be, have illegally immigrated, don't you have to wait a certain period to be able to go back legally, I believe?
Yeah.
Like a friend of mine, or a person I know, she, her dad her parents, I believe, were both undocumented, and she was born here. And at one point, her parents decided to leave the U.S. and try coming back legally, even though they'd been living here. But then the line was just too long, and they had a life here, and so they came illegally again. But her dad couldn't find a job that he wasn't underqualified for or overqualified for, I mean, and so he started dealing drugs, or I'm not sure what else he was involved in, and so he was deported for that, and now and then she said that her mom didn't want to get caught and then possibly have to face that waiting process again, so her mom's in Mexico, so both of her parents, she's in her 20s, but both of her parents are in Mexico. She doesn't have any family here, and she's working on her mom's visa, but her parents are together, but her dad isn't even going to try and come back because he knows because of his criminal record it's probably going to be impossible. But her mom wants to come back to be with her, and the girl I know, she's like, I want to be with my parents. I miss them a lot, but I haven't lived in Mexico. Like, I'm not going to move there just because that's where they are. I'm Mexican American, but I live here, and just what a crazy dynamic it's created in her family, because her parents are still married, but her mom wants to come back and her dad doesn't. And like don't you know what that means? That your parents aren't going to be together anymore. And yeah, it's just a really crazy dynamic that it inserts into families.
That's stressful.
Yeah, one thing else that it talked about was like a family's unauthorized status complicates the normal stages of a student's ability to have like rites of passage, so they're kind of stuck in between the whole idea of like being a child and being an adult, and they don't know how to make their transformation because they don't have as many opportunities, or they're afraid of different things. So I thought that was really interesting.
I think it's also interesting how quinceañeras are at 15, but in American culture, nothing really changes at 15 to make you more of an adult.
My part talked about the documentation status of people and how that can have an effect on like every part of their life. And so the families and the parents and the students and like just everyone, they can live with like constant fear of like, are my parents going to be away? Like, are they going to get deported? Or like even like just yourself, like just living that fear of like, what if I'm not here the next day? And then also it affects jobs because they have to work longer hours and in bad conditions and like with health problems. And it also talked about like how finding resources sometimes can be harder, or like they just don't know about them and so they can't use them, and so that's hard for students and parents. And they started like passing laws, like the one where they passed that someone, if they like look suspicious, the police can detain them just because they look suspicious, which is bad, and other laws like that. So there's just like a lot has to do with someone's documentation status.
My section was about identity and how immigrants to America create this hyphenated self with their home culture fitting into the American mainstream, and also how that interrelates to academic performance and their idea of self-worth. So like trying to balance all these different values and beliefs and navigate the American system with them. And then also when you don't succeed in school because your culture is different, your language is different, your values are different, that your self-worth can decrease because you don't feel valued in the school system.
Did we talk about yours already?
Let's see. Since this is the second time we've done it, mine was where I went off of yours and just kind of created a child that had to deal with all of the different ecological systems, and I guess I'll just say it all again. One of the things that I found interesting was just how basically if one thing goes wrong, they can really snowball. And my example was that if you have a child who is, the child might be documented and but is an ELL student, and their parents don't have a very high level of education and aren't documented, so they don't feel comfortable participating in the school or talking with the teachers about their concerns with their child, in case, I think it's kind of just a fear of forms of having to see that section of Social Security number, it seems like, and something that made me think of is the fact that I need glasses or contacts, and if I couldn't see the board, at least I can tell the teacher that and do modifications and sit closer, or I have, my dad always had insurance, and so I was able to get contacts and be able to see. But if you're an ELL student and you're already struggling and the teacher just thinks you're not paying attention, and then parents can't afford to get you glasses, and just thinking how things like that can, something so small as, and so common as needing glasses, just is an unmet need.
Alright, should we move to precious knowledge then?
So we each answered all of these questions,
Yeah.
so we could just discuss.
Can we just talk about the videos itself, I guess?
Yeah.
Maybe.
So, the first question, video 1, says, what is the content of the Tuscan High School Mexican American Studies program, and how does it reflect culturally relevant pedagogy?
Well, they're talking about minority culture and trying to get students to learn about where they come from and about the system and how that they can work the system and be important. What did you guys take from it?
I thought it was really interesting. I wrote a quote down. One of the teachers said, if you hate your dad, you are hating yourself. If you forgive your dad, you're forgiving yourself. And now you can be whole and create a positive change. Like the idea of respecting who you are, your culture, like knowing your identity and like being secure in those things will help you create a positive change in the world. And I thought that was really good because a lot of people